Please be seated. Paul tells the story of his own conversion so many times, I think most of us could tell it for him. You know, he was on the road, heard the voice of Jesus, struck blind, the greatest persecutor of the church, being called out by Jesus. I mean, you just heard it. But the part what you also heard that we don't often talk about is that another person got a vision from Jesus that day. Ananias, the reluctant healer of Paul. Paul would not be who Paul was, probably, if it had not been for Ananias. But we never hear much about him. We have to assume that since Jesus struck Paul blind, or something struck Paul blind without another person's help, Jesus probably could have just as easily taken the blindness away without another person's help. So there must have been a reason that he called Ananias into the scene. And believe me, Ananias wanted to know that reason more than anyone, right? Because Paul was literally killing people like him. He was persecuting the early church and making sure people couldn't continue to practice their faith in any number of ways. So Ananias had no idea what might happen. And it was a great risk for him. And yet we never speak his name. I understand it's a difficult name to say. I mean, I had to say it like 6 times already, and that was too many. But the reality is, for him to go to a person who might well open his eyes and then throw him in prison or worse was a tremendous risk. And yet we remember Paul as this wonderful apostle, and Ananias just fades into the background. I wonder if the 2 other disciples from today's gospel reading can relate to that, right? I mean, we know there's 12 disciples, right? But how many of you can name all of them? And do not cheat if you had to memorize them in Sunday school. That's not, no. Right? I mean, we get a lot of press to Peter and John. We just did Thomas last Sunday. Judas, of course, before that. Andrew, first called and then immediately forgotten. Let's see. Probably one of those guys who wrote one of the books, the Gospels, right? They were probably there. But that didn't get us even halfway to 12, does it? And so every time the disciples appear, there's always, and some other guys were there, right? And they were important too, right? I mean, they were part of the early church. They were the initial followers of Jesus. Christianity might not be what it is without them, even if we can't always remember their names. One of my favorite authors is Barbara Kingsolver, and one of the things I love about her writing is she has this great attention to detail, which is hard to do, right? Sometimes we forget the names. In one of her novels, one of the characters is the mother of 5 young kids, and so when she's on the phone with her friend, she's constantly being interrupted, right? You can never quite tell if she's talking to her friend or to her kids or what. And I just think that's great, because that is real, right? If you have little kids, unless somebody is watching them, you're never going to have a coherent conversation. It's true. But so often when books are written, they don't capture that little detail, you know? But she does a great job with this. And I just read her adaptation of David Copperfield, which is called Demon Copperhead. And David Copperfield wrote about the plight of poor people during the industrial era. And this is set instead in Appalachia at the turn of the century, meaning 25 years ago, not 125 years ago. And it was, like her writing, just an amazing cast of characters with a tremendous amount of detail. And she wrote about so many things that I have not had the experience of having, like struggling with addiction, struggling to go through treatment and withdrawal, loving somebody who's an addict, and trying to help them when you can't quite help them. The main character spends a lot of time in foster care, sometimes without enough food. And she describes these things in such vivid detail that it feels like you're a part of them. And I gotta say, I think it worked on me. I mean, I don't think I was particularly heartless before, I hope. No comments from the audience, okay? Wait, that sounded heartless. But I have to say that now I have more of a compassion for all kinds of people that I come across that I might otherwise have just ignored or made judgments about, realizing that I don't know anything about their story. I don't know where they're coming from. I don't know what their experience is like. I don't know what is going on inside their internal dialogue. And having felt connected to these fictional characters were struggling, I have more compassion for the real people that I see that are struggling, or may be struggling. The book is full of characters, right? As any of our lives would be if we wrote them down. And some of them come back around, and some of them are there for a little bit, and some of them we don't even know their names. But all of them help shape this main character. All of them are important to his life and to his journey. And I think in life, we often feel like we're the main character of the story, right? Which makes sense to some extent. I mean, we're in our own selves, right? But we forget that everybody else is also the main character in their story. That we're all characters in the same story. And reading this book made me really aware of the vast amount of people who impact our lives on a day-to-day basis, some of whom we may never see again or whose names we may never know. See, I think that Jesus asked Ananias to restore Paul's sight because when Paul could see, physically anyway, he was blind, right? He was blind to people like Ananias. He saw them as something other, something bad. And so too, Ananias was blind to who Paul could be, right? To the transformation that Jesus made possible. And that can be true to us as well. The people that we overlook, the people that we ignore, sometimes we need to open our eyes to see them, to remember that we're not just the main characters of our own story, we are actually all characters in God's story. Ananias really could have been anybody or nobody, but Jesus chose Ananias because Ananias knew what it was to be persecuted by Paul. The transformation of Paul having his vision restored was made that much more powerful and meaningful because of who Ananias was. And poor Peter, God love that guy. Did you catch the part where he put his clothes on and then jumped into the water? He was fishing naked, okay, and then he decided to put clothes on to go swimming. I mean, I'm sure there's some cultural explanation. No, probably not. This poor guy. After the fishing happens, Jesus speaks to them on the beach and he says to Peter 3 times, "Feed my sheep." He changes the words around a little bit, but that's the idea. And poor Peter is like, "Why are you saying this to me? Stop saying this to me. I get you. I hear you." But the reality is, you may remember from a few weeks ago, that Peter said he didn't know who Jesus was 3 times. And for reasons that will always remain unclear to me, Jesus chose Peter to be the rock on which our church was founded. Because Jesus could see something more, something different, something better, even though Peter had denied who he was. Even though Peter, for some reason, goes swimming with his clothes on. He still was something special. And I think oftentimes we think we're either the one who's going to help everybody or we're the one who needs to be helped. But the reality is we're all both of those things, at least at one time or another, and sometimes at the same time. And we can't be the kind of healers and transformers in the world that we would be without the struggles that we've gone through. We can't be both. I mean, we can't be one without the other, and we can't be anything without each other. See, the reason that food plays a central role in our faith, and I know when we come up for communion, it's a pretty small meal, but it reminds us of the way that food brings us together. And even the elements that make up communion, think about it, bread and wine, are a mashing together of a lot of different things, right? All the grains gathered up to make bread, and all the grapes gathered up to make wine, and all of us, whatever our stories may be, gathered up to be this church. When Jesus tells Peter to feed the sheep, he doesn't just mean Peter. He means all of us. He's inviting us to live in a different way, to remember that we are not just the main characters of our own story, but supporting characters in the story of God. And supporting characters doesn't just mean that your name is lower on the playbill. It means literally you can support people, right? The hard moments of your life, the great moments of your life, whatever your story has brought you to on this day can be a gift of transformation to other people. Jesus is inviting us to drop our blindness, to see the people that we might otherwise overlook or categorize as someone not worth our time or conversation, and recognize that they might too be a source of healing. That together we can be more than we could be individually, and that we can do the work that God is calling us to do to make God's dream real in this world.